I knew something was wrong when Justin Palmer handed me the Excellence in Operations Award, with all the enthusiasm of a guy signing his own divorce papers. The whole room clapped, but it was that polite golf clap you hear when someone's kid strikes out at Little League. Even the engraving was spelled wrong. Thomas Brenner for keeping us compliant-ish. I almost laughed. Almost. 8 years. 8 years of keeping Atlas Corporation from getting hammered by federal regulators. 8 years of catching filing errors before they turned into congressional hearings. 8 years of translating government speak at 2 a.m. while everyone else was updating their LinkedIn profiles. I kept this place from burning down more times than I could count, and this was my thank you. A typo on cheap crystal and a seat next to the DJ booth, while the CEO's son clinked champagne glasses with the marketing interns. Look, I'm Tom Brenner, 52 years old, and before we dive into this train wreck, let me tell you something about respect. I spent 22 years in the Navy. I know what real leadership looks like, and I know what happens when chain of command gets ignored. What happened at that Colorado mountain retreat wasn't leadership. It was a public execution disguised as corporate strategy. This executive summit was supposed to celebrate our operational heroes. Their words, not mine. All 150 of us were invited to this lodge outside Denver naturally, but nobody ever asked me to help plan it. That was ironic, since every time they screwed up the logistics, they came running to me to fix it. I found the missing vendor contracts. I made sure our liability coverage matched the venue requirements. I even corrected the lodge's safety documentation because HR didn't notice half the conference rooms weren't up to fire code. But I wasn't the face of the company. I wasn't the shiny new analytics platform they were demoing or the marketing VP who talked like he was pitching on Shark Tank. I was the guy with the corner office near legal who carried a thick regulatory binder everywhere and always had backup documentation in his briefcase. The kind of guy who got work done while others scheduled brainstorming sessions to discuss scheduling work. Still, I showed up. I even wore the Navy suit that didn't make me look like I moonlighted at the DMV. When the awards ceremony started that Friday evening, I nursed a bourbon and tuned out the parade of buzzwords echoing off the lodge walls. Disruptor of the Year, Client Whisperer, Synergy Architect. Good grief. Then they called my name. The room dimmed. A spotlight flickered on. Justin Palmer, CEO Richard Palmer's 29-year-old son, stepped up with a tablet and read from it like the words physically hurt him. This next award goes to someone who keeps our operational engine running smoothly behind the scenes. I'd heard variations of this speech for years. Something about being the backbone, the unsung hero, the steady hand. They praise you with metaphors that sound noble until you realize what they really mean is, we forget he exists until something breaks. Still, I stood to accept the crystal plaque with a nod and a half smile. That's when she grabbed the microphone. Brittany Palmer, Justin's wife, 26 years old, blonde, and polished to within an inch of her personality. She wasn't even on the agenda, but she marched up in her sequined dress like she was hosting the Oscars. See, Brittany had been gunning for me ever since I blocked her executive lifestyle brunch from the corporate card last month. She'd wanted to bill a $20,400 influencer event as team building, and I'd quietly rerouted it to her husband's personal account. I figured she'd forgotten about it. I was wrong. She yanked the mic from Justin and smiled wide enough to show her veneers. "Let's give it up for Tom, everyone," she announced. The 150 faces in the room turned toward me, expecting the usual thank you speech. Then she paused for dramatic effect and let the words drop like a bomb. "And let's all remember to pack your awards before heading out because you're transitioning to retirement. Effective immediately." The clapping stopped. I mean, it stopped like someone cut the power to the building. A glass hit the floor somewhere near the back. Justin blinked like he'd been slapped. CEO Richard Palmer gave that half smirk you see when someone else gets pranked on a video call. HR's face went into full blue screen mode, and I just stood there holding a plaque that didn't even spell my name right. I didn't argue. I didn't ask what she meant or how she knew something I didn't. In the Navy, you learn to read situations fast. This wasn't a mistake or a joke gone wrong. This was deliberate. Brittany had been planning this moment probably since that expense report incident. I just nodded once, turned around, walked out of the main lodge, and drove back down the mountain through the sleet in complete silence. No one followed. No one called. Not even legal. You'd think someone would have asked, hey, should we maybe check if our risk management officer was just publicly fired by someone who doesn't even work here? But nope. Because Tom Brenner was always steady, always calm, always the fixer, until the moment they decided I wasn't worth fixing for. That was Friday at 5:30 p.m. By Monday at 5:30 p.m., exactly 72 hours later, the federal auditor would be asking who the hell let a lifestyle influencer announce the illegal termination of the only person keeping their multi-million-dollar contracts from imploding. The sound that came out of that microphone wasn't just an announcement, it was a declaration of war. Pack your awards because you're transitioning to retirement. Just like that, 8 years of keeping Atlas Corporation legally bulletproof collapsed under the weight of a sentence delivered between sips of champagne. But here's what Brittany didn't know, and what Justin was too weak to explain to her: my federal risk management certification wasn't just a line on my resume. It was the foundation that held up every government contract, every regulatory filing, every piece of federal paperwork that kept Atlas in business. Remove me, and the whole structure collapses in exactly 72 hours. That's how the system works. No active certification, no legal authority to process federal documentation. I drove home through the snow, already calculating the timeline in my head. Friday, 5:30 p.m. Termination. Saturday morning, the automated systems would start flagging my inactive status. By Monday, 5:30 p.m., every document filed over the weekend would be legally invalid. 72 hours to implosion. They just didn't know it yet. I froze, not because I didn't understand what had just happened, but because I understood it perfectly. This wasn't a drunken mistake. This wasn't an awkward joke that missed the mark. This was an ambush wrapped in corporate theater, and Brittany had just pulled the trigger on something she didn't comprehend. The room went silent in stages. First the interns, then operations, then the senior staff. HR kept trying to smile until I turned and placed the award gently back on the table. Let me tell you about the look on Richard Palmer's face. The CEO was 3 drinks into the evening and suddenly remembered he'd left his spine in the ski lodge coat check. He glanced at me, then his shoes, then made a face like he was mentally rewriting the company's crisis management playbook. Justin leaned back in his chair like he was watching a prank video. Amused, slightly uncomfortable, but not moved enough to do anything about it. Brittany kept her eyes on me like she expected applause, like this was her moment to shine. And maybe it was. She'd been floating around Atlas corporate events for 2 years, using her husband's position like a backstage pass to every boardroom she could Instagram. Her background? Event coordination in Scottsdale. That's it. No regulatory training, no compliance certification, no understanding that the federal risk management system doesn't care about your husband's MBA or your social media following. But there she was, running the show like a reality TV Napoleon, completely unaware that she'd just fired the only person standing between Atlas Corporation and federal sanctions. I scanned the crowd one last time. Not a single person stood up. Not a single executive said, "Hey, maybe we should talk about this privately." Even the general counsel, a man I'd personally coached through 3 federal audits with the patience of a Sunday school teacher, sipped his drink and avoided my gaze. So I left. No door slam, no dramatic exit speech. I didn't grab my things or finish the bourbon I'd been nursing. I simply turned, walked out of the main lodge, down the icy wooden steps, and made my way to the guest cabin where I'd left my overnight bag. I packed my toiletries, folded my blazer, left my name tag on the pillow like a resignation letter written in plastic and silence. By the time I hit Highway 70, snow was drifting across the windshield like static on a dying TV channel. My hands didn't shake. My jaw didn't clench, but my foot pressed a little harder on the accelerator with each mile. During the drive home, I ran through every possible angle. This wasn't random. Brittany had been planning this since I blocked her expense report, but she had no idea what my job actually meant. She didn't understand that risk management officer wasn't just something printed on a business card. She didn't know that my active federal risk management certification was what allowed Atlas to legally process government contracts, submit regulatory filings, and maintain compliance with federal oversight requirements. My certification was like a digital seal on every piece of federal paperwork. Remove the seal, and everything becomes invalid. The system gives you exactly 72 hours to restore active certification before automatic compliance violations trigger. It's designed that way to prevent gaps in oversight. Brittany had just started a 72-hour countdown to corporate catastrophe, and she was probably at home right now posting Instagram stories about making tough leadership decisions. At home, I didn't even take off my coat. I sat on the edge of the couch and stared at the blank TV screen. My phone buzzed once, a text from Danny in procurement asking if I was okay. Then nothing. Not HR, not legal, not even a follow-up from Danny. Around 1:30 a.m., I logged into the Atlas internal portal and watched the risk management dashboard load. My credentials were still active, for now. I could still see all the compliance filings, still had clearance for regulatory documents. But I knew that would change. Saturday morning came gray and cold. I sat by the kitchen window in my old Chiefs sweatshirt, drinking coffee and waiting. At 8:15 a.m., I got the first automated email. Certification status update, Atlas Corporation. My federal risk management certification had been flagged as under review due to employment status change. The countdown had officially started. Saturday afternoon, another email. Certification status update, Atlas Corporation. Status changed to inactive pending verification. That meant any documents processed under my authority after Friday 5:30 p.m. were now flagged for review. I logged back into the Atlas portal. My access was graying out section by section. First the personnel directory, then the secure filing system, then the federal database. Like watching your security clearance evaporate in real time. But here's what I noticed. The automatic processing system was still running. Atlas had 3 federal filings scheduled for weekend submission. Standard quarterly reports that always processed Saturday morning. The system was using my cached digital signature, not realizing my certification was already flagged. 3 documents. Submitted Saturday at 6:30 a.m. under an inactive certification, each one a potential federal violation. Sunday brought more automated chaos. The compliance system tried to process 3 additional emergency filings. Something about a new government contract that couldn't wait until Monday. Again, my cached signature, again under an inactive certification. 6 total documents, all federally invalid, all carrying my digital signature without my authorization or active certification backing them up. By Sunday evening, I'd received the final automated email. Certification status, Atlas Corporation, inactive. My name had been completely removed from the Federal Registry. Any Atlas document bearing my signature was now legally worthless. I closed the laptop and whispered to my empty living room, 72 hours exactly. Monday morning was 18 hours away. That's when someone at Atlas would try to submit their weekly compliance summary and discover that their entire federal framework had collapsed like a house of cards. I poured another cup of coffee and waited for my phone to ring. Monday morning, 8:45 a.m. It started with an email that would make Atlas's general counsel spill coffee on his $3,000 laptop. Subject line, urgent, missing active certification on recent filings. Sender, Patricia Williams, Senior Federal Compliance Auditor. Not someone you ignore. Not someone who sends emails for entertainment. Patricia Williams was the kind of federal auditor who could shut down operations with a single phone call and sleep soundly that night. The email body was surgical in its precision. We reviewed last week's end-of-quarter submissions and weekend emergency filings. As of Friday, 5:30 p.m., no active credential is listed for your internal risk officer on federal record. 6 documents submitted, Saturday through Sunday, require immediate clarification of signatory authority. Please provide certification status within 4 business hours or expect automatic compliance review. Translation: you filed federal documents with an inactive officer's signature. That's not a paperwork error. That's potential fraud, misrepresentation, and violation of federal oversight requirements. The kind of thing that triggers congressional hearings and makes CEOs testify under oath. By 9:15 a.m., Atlas's general counsel was in full panic mode. He'd pulled up the federal compliance portal and stared at the screen like it might change if he blinked hard enough. There it was, big and bold. Active license holder, none on file. It had been exactly 72 hours since my name vanished from the registry. Not transferred, not replaced, just gone. And in that window, Atlas had submitted 6 federal documents under my cached signature without any active certification backing them up. Every contract signed, every disclosure filed, every regulatory form processed in that 72-hour window was now legally invalid. Worse than worthless, it was evidence of systematic compliance failure. By 9:45 a.m., someone from HR was having what sounded like a nervous breakdown in a Slack channel labeled "Emergency Situation Urgent." The messages were flying. Does anyone have Tom's phone number? Who authorized weekend filings? Did Tom actually resign or not? And by 10 a.m., every executive who had pretended not to see me leave the lodge 3 nights earlier received the same calendar invite: Emergency Federal Compliance Review, mandatory attendance location, executive boardroom, 12th floor, time 10:30 a.m. Required: CEO Richard Palmer, CFO, COO, VP Operations, VP Legal, General Counsel, HR Director Justin Palmer. The required list read like a federal grand jury summons. Meanwhile, somewhere in the Palmer household, while Justin poured cold brew into a monogrammed tumbler, he probably told his wife, "Relax, it's just paperwork." Legal's always freaking out about something. But Brittany was too busy that morning to worry about corporate compliance. She was posting a filtered selfie from the retreat with the caption, "Sometimes leadership means making the hard calls, still glowing from this amazing weekend. #executive wife, #tough choices, #moving forward." She had no idea she'd just become the star of a federal compliance investigation. Back at Atlas, the general counsel prepped the boardroom like he was hosting a war tribunal. He printed Patricia Williams's email, highlighted every critical phrase in yellow, and projected it on the massive screen behind the conference table. Below that, he pulled up the federal compliance portal showing our certification status in all its devastating clarity. The numbers were damning: 72 hours of non-compliance, 6 invalid federal documents, 0 active certification backing. One very angry federal auditor, Justin, sauntered in at 10:25 a.m., still chewing a protein bar, apparently unaware that his wife had just triggered the corporate equivalent of a nuclear meltdown. So, is this about the compliance stuff? Because if it's about Tom again... The general counsel turned slowly, face pale as accounting paper. Tom was our only certified federal risk officer. His credential was linked to every single piece of government documentation we process. Without him, every federal filing we've submitted since Friday is legally invalid. Justin shrugged with the casual confidence of someone who'd never faced actual consequences. "Can't we just have someone else sign the forms?" "You can't backdate federal compliance," the general counsel said, voice cracking slightly. "This isn't a vacation request form. We're talking about potential criminal referrals for misrepresentation of federal documents." The CEO, Richard Palmer, pinched the bridge of his nose like he was trying to squeeze sense into his skull. Who the hell authorized weekend submissions without verification? Everyone looked at each other with the collective expression of passengers who'd just realized their pilot had passed out mid-flight. Then someone whispered, "The system used Tom's automatic signature protocol." The screen flashed as the general counsel clicked through the weekend filings. There they were. 6 documents, all bearing my digital signature, all time-stamped after my certification went inactive. Ghost signatures on loaded legal documents. Saturday, 6:30 a.m., 3 quarterly compliance reports. Sunday, 11:45 a.m., 2 emergency contract amendments. Sunday, 4:15 p.m., 1 federal disclosure update, each one a potential felony if Patricia Williams decided to refer this to the Department of Justice. Justin's face began to shift as reality penetrated his privileged bubble. The cocky confidence faded, replaced by something that looked like actual fear. He looked like someone slowly realizing the house party he'd just hosted might have burned down the entire neighborhood. "What's the worst-case scenario here?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. The general counsel didn't answer immediately. He just stared at Patricia Williams's email signature block, which included her official title, Senior Federal Compliance Auditor, Criminal Referral Division. Then he pointed at one word that Patricia Williams had underlined twice in her email. Sanctions. The room fell into funeral silence. Outside, Denver traffic hummed along normally, oblivious to the fact that a major corporation was hemorrhaging federal compliance in real time. Across town, I was finishing a crossword puzzle at my kitchen table, phone sitting silently beside my coffee mug. They still hadn't called, but they would. At 2:20 p.m., Monday, my phone finally rang. Not from HR, not legal, not even Justin, who I assumed was currently locked in a supply closet hyperventilating into a branded Atlas paper bag. It was the COO, Margaret Stone, a woman who once described risk management as that background stuff so we don't get audited. Her tone today, barely controlled panic wrapped in corporate speak. Tom, hi. Listen, we'd love to discuss bringing you back in a consulting capacity, just to help us navigate this regulatory situation. Regulatory situation. They were hemorrhaging federal compliance and calling it a minor hiccup. I let the silence stretch. She rushed to fill it. Just until we recalibrate our workflows and restore confidence with the auditors. Honestly, no one has more expertise in federal risk management than you. We'd compensate you generously, thinking $133,000 annually, which represents a 40% increase from your previous $95,000 salary. Is that what Brittany recommended before or after she fired me over the cheese board? Nervous laugh. There was clearly a miscommunication at the retreat. Sure, I said, because usually when someone announces your retirement into a microphone in front of 150 people, they mean, we appreciate your service. Margaret hesitated. The real issue is operational continuity. We need someone with your certification to— You need me, I cut in. Not a consultant, not a contractor. You need Tom Brenner, Federal Risk Management Officer, to rebuild the compliance framework that Brittany demolished for her Instagram moment. Silence. Then she softened, of course. But logistically, given the circumstances, we're looking to engage you as a 1099 contractor initially. Premium hourly rate, flexible schedule. I almost laughed. I used to be an officer. Now you want me as a freelancer. Look, Tom, we want to make this right. A full reinstatement might take time, board approval, paperwork, but we can bring you on immediately under this structure. I'll consider it, I said. Audible shock. You'll consider it? I need to discuss this with my attorney and my financial advisor. My schedule's suddenly quite busy. I'll get back to you. Tom, this is extremely time-sensitive. Patricia Williams expects our response by close of business today. I know. Tick-tock. I hung up before she could say anything else. Then I called George Martinez, my old mentor. Former Marine, 25 years in corporate risk management, now an independent consultant who specialized in federal compliance disasters. They want me back, I told him. Of course they do. They just watched their entire regulatory foundation collapse faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. What are you thinking? I opened my laptop and started typing. Terms and conditions for re-engagement. Full back pay, retroactive to Friday, 5:30 p.m. Security clearance immediately restored. New title, Chief Risk Officer. Direct reporting to the board chairman, not the CEO. Authority over all federal compliance matters. And one more thing. A formal written apology from the company acknowledging the improper termination. Let them sweat until Wednesday, George advised. Patricia Williams won't do anything until Thursday anyway. Make them come to you. Wednesday afternoon, Atlas called again. This time it was the board chairman himself, not some middle manager. Richard Palmer had apparently been removed from negotiating duties after the board learned his daughter-in-law had triggered a federal investigation. Tom, we need to resolve this immediately. Patricia Williams is threatening to refer this to the Justice Department. We're prepared to meet your terms. All of them? All of them. Chief Risk Officer, $133,000 annual salary, board reporting, full restoration of authority. And yes, the written apology. Thursday, 3:15 p.m. I walked into Atlas HQ through the main entrance, not because I was making a statement, but because they'd specifically requested it. Apparently, they wanted everyone to see that the risk management crisis was being resolved. The receptionist stood as I stepped off the elevator. They're waiting for you, Mr. Brenner. Mr. Brenner. Not Tom, not hey compliance guy, but the formal respect that comes with being indispensable. The boardroom was packed. CEO, CFO, COO, General Counsel, Justin, HR Director, even 2 outside board members. And at the head of the table sat Patricia Williams, her federal binder open like a roadmap to corporate redemption. Let's begin, she said, and the room settled into respectful silence. She turned directly to a page flagged Remedial Compliance Resolution. Atlas Corporation has acknowledged a 72-hour gap in certified risk management oversight, resulting in 6 improperly authorized federal filings. The company has agreed to full remediation under Restored Officer Thomas Brenner, effective immediately. She slid a document across the table. Chief Risk Officer Thomas Brenner will assume full federal compliance authority with direct board oversight. All prior filings will be resubmitted under proper certification within 30 days. Not consultant. Not contractor. Chief Risk Officer. I looked at Justin, who was staring at his hands like they might contain an apology he'd never find the courage to speak. Then I looked at the empty chair where Brittany would have sat if she hadn't been permanently banned from Atlas corporate events. One question, I said. Who's going to explain to the board how a lifestyle influencer managed to trigger a federal investigation? Patricia Williams almost smiled. That's not my department, Mr. Brenner. That's yours now. I signed the reinstatement documents, stood, and gathered my new executive folder.